Stoughton. Welcome to another edition of EMS C-Level. This week we have a special edition with Jackie Mattox, who is the President, CEO, Founding Director of Women in Electronics. Jackie, thanks so much for joining us from your Caribbean conference center there. We're all living in our little virtual spaces at the moment. Let's start with a quick background of your own and Women in Electronics.
Well, first of all, Philip, thank you for having me. Very honored to be here. So appreciate having this time with you today. Just background of me, I started in the electronic component industry when I was in college at a rep firm and fell in love with the industry because of the people. And got to know the channel and worked my way into distribution and managing distributors across Southern California, became sales manager, and just really loved, the relationship side of things, figuring out how to maximize the channel, and just really loved it and found my home here in the industry. And then I was off for a period of time to raise my 3 children and came back to the industry. And that's when I started Women in Electronics, is when I came back and found that things didn't look a lot different from when I had left. And so anyway, that's when I became the founder of Women in Electronics and a team of people alongside of us. And at this point, I'm the president and CEO.
Okay. And that was about, 4 years ago that you founded Women in Electronics. Give me a little bit of background to the journey so far with that. Obviously, did you come back and, obviously some frustration that things hadn't moved forward? Was your frustration in terms of what was going on based on a personal experience or just what you'd observed in the industry?
Well, it's interesting that you say frustration. I wouldn't say that I was frustrated. I felt like I saw a need. So I was very fortunate in my journey up that I had a lot of amazing male mentors. A lot of the leaders you see in our industry, I saw them all at all these executive conferences, and I admired and respected them so much. And then I had a lot of mentors that were awesome and that were sponsors and opened doors for me. So it was not of a frustration, more of, but where's all the ladies? So I was so used to being one of the only ones at a lot of these events and conferences. And I was meeting women when I came back that seemed fantastic, that seemed amazing, that seemed so qualified. And I was thinking, why are you not there? Like, I just couldn't figure it out. So it's just something, an idea came to me in 2017, and I decided, maybe we should just try this. We should invite about 20 women, and just had a whole picture in my head of 20 women coming together from around the country to even talk about, is this a need in the industry? Is it something valued? Is it something that the women would want to do? And the whole premise was not the men against the women, anything like that. It was all about, how do we unite us together, but recognizing that women still do not hold a lot of leadership roles. So let's come together as mature professionals and talk about this, because a lot of money is being left on the table. So all the data proves that the more diverse nature you have in your organizations, whether it's gender parity, age diversity, ethnic diversity, all levels of diversity, the more your relative returns go up. So, right off there, I started researching a lot and just deciding I love this industry so much. Why don't we decide together, how do we leave a legacy in this industry, and how do we leave it better than where we found it? And really, gender parity is a really great way to do that.
Yeah. So you started in 2017. An interesting time to start, and you particularly, you come from the distributor background, so you know what's going on particularly in terms of the supply chain. But politically, there's a lot going on. you've got the trade wars going on. 2 years later, you've got more disruptions from COVID. Now you've got disruptions from shortages. What I'm curious about is, when there's so much going on, does that help focus people's attention on diversity? Does that reduce people's attention on diversity? Do they go back to old habits and the boys just get together and try and fix everything? What kind of happens when the world's kind of shaken up, which it seems to have been constantly in the 4 years you've been running Women in Electronics?
Well, that is a big question. I would have to say what really gets people's attention is the bottom line, really. Women in electronics, it is the right thing to do to think about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But unless it's really imposed, a lot of companies are just going to kick the can down the road. I mean, this is just what's happened historically, and really for a lot of legitimate reasons. There's so much to do when you're running an organization. It's like that's a big thing on the list. And so what we're here to say with Women in Electronics is, we recognize that it's a massive effort, even just to dive in and get your toes wet. It just seems overwhelming for a lot of organizations because there's a lot of do's and don'ts. And so I think one of the benefits of aligning with an initiative like Women in Electronics is there's no blame game. You just hop in where you're at. And that's the progress. So we find that it doesn't matter what organization it is, everybody needs improvement. I mean, personally, all of us need growth and improvement. And so why wouldn't the organizations, right? So it's just a process as we go along in our industry. First of all, the attention to it is really good, that we now have attention, but that's not enough. We need investment and we need focus. So we're here to say, let's come together as men and women. Let's focus on this effort. So the whole diversity conversation, there's just so much to it, but we believe that the gender parity part really burst the bubble. I mean, once you get the gender parity, you really get a lot of diversity within that. So that's our focus. That's our wheelhouse, is the gender parity.
Yeah. What I'm curious about, when I look at the industry, I work with, kind of $20 billion plus corporations that are manufacturers. I work with OEMs. I work with Silicon Valley startups. There's quite a variation in how they perform on this diversity. I work with some Silicon Valley startups, well-funded startups that have got maybe 100 staff and have got 50 women and have got a very diverse environment, and very much have that parity, very much treat people evenly. And then as you kind of go through layers of the supply chain, it feels to me as if, as the companies get bigger and more mature, it gets worse. Is that something that you would agree? If you look right up at the very, very large tech companies, they're the ones that seem to have struggled the most. The manufacturing companies, maybe somewhere in the middle, but we're starting to see some women CEOs in EMS, for example, which I think is hugely valuable. Is that something that's typical, and is it just the maturity of the business?
Well, that's another big question. I can only say in the electronics industry, and again, we have such a sophisticated channel, right? Within the channel, we have manufacturers, contract manufacturers, we have design services, we have reps, we have distributors, you name it, we have just this huge channel. So I would say we have been a very male-dominated industry for a long time. Yeah. And until we educate ourselves on unconscious bias, emotional intelligence, all these things, we want to work with whoever looks like us and whoever is easiest to work with. And a lot of this, like I'm saying, it's just not the blame game. I think once people become educated and they catch themselves and they say, oh yeah, I get that. I'm kind of doing that. A lot of things start to change. But systemic change is very slow and requires a lot of patience and a lot of grace. So here at Women in Electronics, we focus on where we want to go versus what we don't want, right? We don't focus on what what we want to change, we focus on where we're going, and we want
Yeah.
to take everyone with us, with us, the men and the women, because the men have the growth opportunity as well as the women. We have women who, in a male dominated industry, we need a lot of education on how to succeed when you're one of the only women at the table.
Mm.
Confidence is a huge factor. Women going for next level promotions because, they don't check all the boxes with the job requirements. They might have 8 out of the 10 and they think they're not qualified. A man will see 5 and thinks he's golden, right? He's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll learn the rest, no problem.
Yeah.
But women can also learn from that a little bit,
Mm.
to be confident and to be okay with not knowing everything and to learn. So there's just a lot of education. Women supporting other women in a male dominated industry can be another huge issue. A
Mm.
lot of times the women don't want to seem like they're not aligned with the men in a male dominated industry. So aligning with like women in electronics is kind of like a statement. So
Yeah.
we're finding that we have to do a lot of education. We have tremendous support from a lot of the men in our industry. And we're trying to encourage the women to say, it's okay to join. It's okay to be a part of this. You're not going to be looked upon negatively. So I
Yeah.
think even the message is, when the men understand it's not a threat, right? When they understand that we're not trying to, have some massive takeover or, something like that.
Mm.
They get on board. And if you're business minded and you look at the data and you look at the, all the research that's been done, any business person would say, okay, this makes sense, right? And
Yeah.
now some of it is mandated. So we have the ESG laws. So as much as we want to say a lot of people are becoming more involved, a lot of it is becoming imposed. So all public companies here in the US, at least, you have to comply with
Mm.
ESG laws, which have diversity and inclusion in there. So we're finding the companies that are most successful with DEI efforts are organizations that link it to pay somehow. So if you're a manager, somehow your pay is linked to the more diverse you create your team. So whatever those KPIs are, those to me are the most successful companies with DEI initiatives and changing their culture.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. Whenever you want to make change, you have to look at what you require, but you have to look at what you measure and what you incentivize, and that incentivizing is a key part of it. You talked about education there. What kind of programs are available for companies, for people in the C-suite that are looking to develop a more diverse team and are looking to develop strategies to bring the right people in?
Okay, well, that's another good question. So ultimately, I think I'll start with this. We actually have a talent crisis in the industry.
Yeah.
We're not bringing in enough youth. We're not retaining them. We might get them for a couple of years and then they're gone. Part of that is our channel is very sophisticated. It takes a couple of years just to understand how everything flows together, right? So I think a lot of us that are involved with women electronics, we kind of grew up in the industry. We know it kind of like the back of our hand. But when you have someone new coming in, it can be very overwhelming. So basically, we have created a mentorship program at Women in Electronics. So those leaders coming in, those rising leaders, the new talent, we like to take them and put them in our mentorship program because we are finding it's a good source of retention. So once people find a home in the industry, they tend to stay. So the trick is to getting them past that 2-year mark. If we can just get them past, so their company benefits, they benefit, and it's not just young rising talent. We have mature seasoned talent in our mentorship program. That's they're mentors and they're mentees. So it's kind of a big question, but I think we have to start at the talent. Who are we bringing in? Who are we retaining? How are we retaining? And then also, to me, what I'm finding is one of the biggest issues is we have so much talent right under our nose. But a lot of companies are not looking at their promotion policies. So we're worried so much about hiring, but what about promoting. So a lot of times there's people right there in that company that could go to the next level, that could step into those leadership roles if they were just developed up or tapped on the shoulder. So I would say that that's a big issue, and it's something that I'm trying to address in the industry as well, is what are we doing with promotion, is taking that diverse talent that's already there and promoting them up. And then what are we doing with our recruitment efforts? And last is we are forming it's starting this month, it's a DEI council. So we've brought together some strategists, not just in our industry, but just who have been very successful with DEI, cultural change, HR best practices. We've put them together on a council. So we're meeting quarterly, and we're going to be developing some best practices that we can then offer the industry organizations, and then also some pitfalls. You know, what to avoid. Where have people spent money that has not made sense, and what are some common mistakes? So we're going to gather all that information and offer that to the industry.
Okay. One of the questions I was curious about, or one of the things I'm curious about, is our role models are a very important part, particularly when you talk about STEM education and bringing people in at that kind of start of the industry. You know, if you join a company and the board is largely male and you're male, you can look to that and say, okay, that's kind of where I'm going. If you're female, that becomes perhaps a little bit more challenging. But you know, when we have female CEOs in certain companies, we have female vice president, maybe a female president at some point. You know, there are plenty of female leaders in Europe and elsewhere. Does that help people kind of visualize where they're going?
Okay, so that's critical. It's not only helpful, it's essential. So I'll have to say that as many of the executive conferences I did in my career, it was always me and the guys. And I didn't even realize that every time I went to a presentation, it was always a male presenting. And so when I came back to the industry, a kind of defining moment for me was who's now one of our council members, Lynn Terrell. She works at Flex. And at the time, she was a president of one of the AvNet divisions. And she was presenting, and something in me just resonated when I saw her presenting. And first of all, she did a phenomenal job, but it was the first time I realized, oh my gosh, like I could be doing that. Like it had never dawned on me. It sounds so crazy. But I realized when starting Women in Electronics, women need to know that they can. We don't always know that. It just seems something like so basic. But that was a pretty defining moment for me. And I went up to her afterwards. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a woman present at one of these conferences. And thank you so much. And now she's, you know, on our council, and she's very involved in our organization. And now we have sponsorship at Flex as well, you know, as a result. But you know, I would have to say that there's a few components to this. So we talk about mentorship. So definitely men and women mentoring the next rising leaders up 100% is essential. And we have an amazing program for that. But also sponsorship. So, you know, that's going a step further from mentorship to say, I am going to put my name behind this person, and I am going to fight for them and champion for them. And I'm going to open doors for them and really help them get to these next levels. So that's really putting your name on the line, but there's plenty of great talent that you can look at somebody who, whether it's a woman, whether it's somebody of diverse nature, always have somebody in mind who you're trying to help up that leadership pole. And then the other thing is allyship. I just did a whole podcast about this where I was invited onto a panel, and I didn't know that much about it, but I love this whole concept of allyship. And what that is people of influence, the top leaders who are already there, using their influence to open the doors for people who don't have that opportunity yet. So, you know, if I look at our council members for Women in Electronics, we have a lot of our top leaders sitting on that council, and that's what they're doing every day. They're using their sphere of influence to help the existing leaders, rising leaders, men, women, whoever it is, but the next generation up. It's so critical and important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I'm curious about as we go forward is you look at you coming back 4 years ago and what you saw in the industry, and maybe not giving them a particularly good report card and not a great score. And I can see what you've achieved in the last 4 years is really substantial, and one hopes you would give that a good score. But what kind of score would you give the industry over those 4 years? How well has it done? I mean, you mentioned Flex a couple of times, and I kind of hold them to be a good example. You see the change in that company in the last 5 years, and it just looks very different, doesn't it, from a diversity through a diversity lens. But what about the rest of the industry? How's it done in that period?
So it's interesting, if you talk about a scorecard, I would say it just depends how you look at it. So I would say, as far as leadership and heart for the industry, capable people, it's an A. I feel like we have some of the top leaders across any industry, hands down. I feel that as far as diversity and inclusion, if you look at the data, women are only in, the best we can tell in our industry from what we've gathered is up to the max 13% in leadership type of positions.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not where we want to be, right? It's just not where you want to be. So we're reaching for that parity, that 50% parity, because not only is it good for the women, but it's good for the industry, it's good for the men, it's good for the organizations, it's good for profits, it's good for innovation. That's the thing that we keep neglecting to talk about. Is we talk about STEM innovation. We have to get those female engineers to that table. They have different ways of seeing things, they have different design capabilities. So to me, it's one of the tragedies that's going on is not having enough female thought leadership at that table. So we're happy to report that our organization is reaching down into lower educational levels, and so we're reaching girls even way down, just to encourage them and to know that they could be a part of something, and that we already at this level are trying to pave the way for them. We're trying to encourage them and welcome them into this industry. So we have some ways to go. I think the awareness is critical, but we have to do more. This is not, talking about it isn't enough. We need the companies to actually invest in DEI initiatives, and we need them to focus on it and have it in their business plan. If it's not in your business plan, it's not going to happen. And really, as we go forward into the future, what got us here won't get us there. So our current leaders have gotten us to a certain level, and there's been a great amount of amazing leadership. But we have to look at, what does leadership look like from this point forward? Our world has changed. And, if you're a leader who's not focused on listening, compassion, empathy, collaboration, all these types of qualities that we never looked at as strong leadership skills are now critical and essential. So we have to look at the face of leadership that has changed. And we just got to fast forward ahead now.
Yeah, move as quickly as we can. And what we should be moving to, when you think about design, when you think about all these elements, is an ecosystem that reflects the consumer. And the consumer is, without doubt, 50% female. It's diverse. It has all those factors in. And when you think about, having largely men designing products for a market that is that diverse, it doesn't make any sense, does it? And I think some of the companies I've seen that have had very successful businesses as a result of having a diverse group are from that design side, are from that group that are really focused around the product. Is that an area that we can learn from? Are there pockets of the industry that have been more successful that can help teach other parts of the industry?
Is another great question. It's an area of definite focus for us. I think you hit it exactly, that we're not matching our end user. If you look at our sales channel, it doesn't match the end user. So we have to change that. And really the end users want us to change it as well.
Yeah.
So we're looking on women electronics, if you look at the electronic component industry, it's just massive. Within that, you have so many verticals. You have industrial, medical, energy, you name it. You've got it, so many verticals. So our goal is, now that we've aligned with companies like Flex, we're going to try to get some more contract manufacturers, try to get more to those OEMs. So I feel like once we can get to those OEMs, then we can start to maybe bring the end user back with the channel, to be collaborating more. Because I found when I was in the channel, there was such a disconnect between the end user, say the manufacturer, wherever it started with the manufacturer, how it ended at the end user was just a huge disconnect. And, a lot of that is just, we're not listening. We're not reaching down enough. If you look at, new products, for instance, it's like, how many times you develop, NPI, new product introductions, and it's just a miss. So we have to do all these customizations and all this stuff. And we would just go to the customers and ask what they actually want, versus trying to just push down what we think or what we want them to use. So to me, it's a huge disconnect in our channel. So we have to be willing to listen and be willing to pull them in. We have a lot of industry events even where it's all this sales channel. And I'm always thinking, where's the customer? Why aren't we listening to the customer? So anyway.
No, I think it's that joined up approach all along the value chain, all along the supply chain that makes sense, and where we can add the most value. And I think, as you say, that for me, that connection to the consumer is fundamental, because the consumer's view is changing. It's impacting the view of investors. It's impacting the view of compliance. So all those things are affected, and we do have a generation of consumers that are much more savvy to that kind of thing. And when they're looking at products, so if they see a brand is getting a bad rap in terms of diversity, they're going to think twice about buying that product. And again, as well as the fact that having more women in your organization will make you more profitable, that's pretty much proven. It's also the fact that it will impact the volume of business that you do if you are seen to be doing the wrong thing as well. So it's, there's a bit of carrot and stick in there, which there needs to be. I guess there's a lot of encouragement in there, which is really important. But it feels to me like it is moving in the right direction. I think the phrase that you used, we need to fast forward. For me, that's the most critical thing. How do we get the accelerator down? That's the big challenge. And I guess it's more of what you're doing.
Well, and I think that the world is forcing the change. Basically, we can't sit back and just do what we've been doing anymore. Either you get on board and you change and you evolve and you stay agile, or you're just not going to be on that train moving forward. So the world is literally changing. And I also believe our youth, I have so much hope in our youth. And I think that this is the game changing upcoming generation. I think they're very evolved. I think that they look at things different. And I think you're right. I think they want meaning. They want purpose. I actually disagree with a lot of people who say they don't want to work hard. I find the opposite. I find they are willing to work hard, but they have to work for the right people. They have to work for, an organization that has the right mission. I listen to people like Simon Sinek, who I absolutely love. He has a really great viewpoint on organizations and leadership. And he says, any company is not in business just to make money. I mean, that's like, you're in business to make an impact on the world. You're in business to make these components to better humanity or whatever it might be. And in the process, yes, you're going to make money doing that. But I think there needs to be that shift in organizations. What are your values? What do you stand for? Do you value your people? And if you say you do, how does that show up in the workplace? Because I'll tell you, this is a generation that sniffs it out super quick. So they're not the generation that's going to come and work for you for a while and just kind of do what they're supposed to do and just not say anything. They're actually going to come and either like it and stay and be productive, or they're going to leave.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think I see a lot of hope and a lot of vision with that with the generation that are coming through. Our generations that are perhaps in the latter part of our career should be just trying to enable as much of that energy as possible in the industry. And the other thing you mentioned there is that change in attitude from maybe shareholder value to stakeholder value.
Yes.
And I think that is so fundamentally important to the way we think about businesses. It's not just that quarterly bottom line. It's not just that stock price that is the true value of that business. There are so many better ways of measuring performance. Jackie, fantastic to talk to you. We could talk all day, but we probably shouldn't. Thank you so much for your time. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep talking about it. Keep doing the podcast. I love that. And look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much for your